So I stabbed myself. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, y'all. Oh my goodness. Clearly, I'm cold. I just woke up. It's early in the morning and it's freezing, and I just have my blanket on. So, anyways, what we're going to be talking about is the snowstorm that blew through the middle of the country. Yeah, I was caught in that. If you have seen any of my other catastrophe videos, then you know what this video is about to consist of, because what took place, I really don't even know how I'm going to get that all on this video. You don't know what happened. I just feel like this is deja vu because this has happened multiple times. But needless to say, let me go ahead and get into it. So obviously there was a snowstorm. This took place around February 2nd, and it pretty much lasted to like February 4th, almost the 5th. But anyways, around this time, I was headed to Michigan. A lot of you know that I live in Michigan, but I was not coming here actually to come home. I was coming here to pick up a load. I was going to take it to Ohio, and then I think I was going to come home after that. So I still had a couple more hours on my clock where I could get in one more load. Now, I did know about the winter storm. I did know about the snowstorm that was about to happen. I want to say that I was a little ignorant. I also felt like I was gonna like play it through, which a lot of people do. I wasn't the only one on the road, and I was just gonna take it by eye, and if it got too serious, I was gonna stop, I guess. But other than that, I also knew, or I guess I had in mind, that I was going to make it home before I got into the brink of it, just because Ohio isn't far from Michigan. So I started making it to my destination in Michigan. It was a different part of Michigan, not where I stay. When I was driving out there, it was raining, but I started to tell, just based off the dashboard, things like that, it was starting to get colder. The rain was starting to turn into like slushy ice, and then it was starting to build a little bit on my windshield wipers. The longer I was driving, I started to see snow collecting on the roads and things like that. So I knew that I was pretty much about to get into the snowstorm. But again, I was just going to play it by feeling and things like that. So by the time I get to my stop, I can't lie to you, it was bad already. I did not expect for it to be this bad already. And when I got out there, there was snow like covering this distribution center. They didn't even get a chance to plow it, understood, because the snow is like literally still coming down. I got stuck 2 times. I got stuck trying to take my trailer to park it because I was dropping off a load, actually. Sorry, this story may seem a little like, but I was dropping off a load here. So they told me to go and drop this trailer in lot da 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 da, right? So I go to this lot. This lot is on a incline. And needless to say, after I dropped this trailer, I tried to bobtail up this little hill, but because it was so much new snow formed, it was like almost impossible. I was sliding down no matter what I was doing. My tires were just spinning, and I can admit I did not have any cat litter or things like that with me, which is a no-no. Definitely have cat litter or something with you. That don't make sense that I didn't have it, but whatever. I kept finding ways to like back up and then try to get enough momentum to get up the hill, and eventually I did. They tell me to go to a separate lot to go and pick up this empty trailer. So I get over there, I go to pick up the empty trailer, and as soon as I hook up to it and everything, I try to pull forward and I'm not able to. And there could be multiple reasons why your trailer or you can't move once you hook up to a new trailer. Sometimes the brake drums could be frozen. Sometimes the airline could be frozen. Sometimes it could just be a delay in the air getting into the brakes or whatever in the trailer. Or it could just be that you're sliding or you're on ice or whatever. There's multiple things, right? I'm the type of person where I try to figure it out on my own before I just go Googling it and stuff like that. I don't know how that works for everybody, but it oftentimes does work for me, not gonna lie. So I haven't really deterred from that method yet. When I realized that my my trailer wasn't moving and I wasn't moving and I recognized I was pretty much stuck again, I tried, shoveling the snow from out of all the areas where my drive tires were and also where my tandem tires are and things like that. It still wasn't working. Eventually, I had the idea to pull my tandem release arm out because I felt like if I could at least pinpoint what's keeping me stuck, then I'd be able to work on that instead of trying to figure out from every angle. So obviously, if like the brake drums where the tandems are is the issue, then I would be able to figure that out because my tractor will be moving and then it'll catch on the tandem pin. Does that make sense? Instead of me not being able to move, period, even though the tandem release arm is released. Then that would tell me that I'm sliding. As I was pulling forward after I pulled the release arm, I realized that it wasn't my brake drums, that I was just sliding. So I'm like, oh, okay. And thankfully, because of the momentum of me having my tandem release arm pulled and it had me have that extra movement, it sort of pushed me a little bit forward where I was able to get up in miles per hour a little bit faster so that I could get out of the issue. And I can't lie, I did this a couple times after that. And so just as a side tip for you guys, if you ever get stuck and you are attached to a trailer and you're in snow or whatever and you don't necessarily know what to do, before you go and try everything else, I would suggest trying to pull the tandem release arm. It's worked for me so far with no issues. So I eventually get everything squared away and I start leaving the DC. Then I eventually get on the freeway. So as I'm driving, it's getting bad, y'all. Not only was it the fact that the snow was coming down a lot and it was dense snow, but also it was coming down in the angle that I was going towards. So it was pretty much hitting up against my windshield. I started to recognize that my windshield was piling up with this watery ice that was pretty much adhering to my windshield, and my windshield wipers weren't taking it off because they were also caked with ice. And this has happened to me multiple times before, right? But at the same time, it never happened this fast and this bad. I guess it's just because I didn't get to experience this level of snowstorm yet. The issue was it was getting hard for me to see. So I would have to stop at a rest area, pull my windshield wipers, have them hit up against the windshield, and then I was trying to get the ice and stuff off my windshield. And as I would continue to go, the snow was coming down even more and more. It was getting hard for me to see. I could handle a lot of things, but I think the two-punch combo with this snowstorm was not only that the roads were bad, I mean, it was very, very snowy on the roads, but also now you're making it very hard for me to see. Needless to say, I ended up stopping at a Love's and I stopped there for the day. It was to the point where I couldn't make it to another stop because the stops were getting further and further apart and the snow was piling up on the shoulder, so I couldn't pull off to the side to get the snow off the windshield. And so it was piling up and I wasn't able to stop to fix it. And so I needed to stop at a rest area or somewhere. So thankfully there was a Love's and I stopped there. Whew. So I got my gas and that was that for the day. I had it in my mind that I was just going to wait it out that night. In my mind, I'm like, okay, well, it should, pass by. And I realized in retrospect that my main issue was I did not really pay attention to the weather. I wasn't paying attention to the news. I was really just aware that there was a winter storm. And actually, I had only paid attention to the Michigan broadcasting. And at that time, it was saying that it was primarily in Michigan, which it wasn't. Obviously, that was my huge mistake. I was not following the storm. So that was my bad. Anyways, so I wake up that morning and it's no longer snowing where I'm at in Michigan. So that was obviously a green light for me. I'm like, well, let me go ahead because I could have been on my way home by now, but I'm still out here, not even at my next DC to go ahead and get started to come home. I go ahead, do my pre-trip, get ready, and I pull off. And everything's fine for now. Yeah, it's still pretty bad on the roads, but it's not nearly as bad. Like, this is super manageable. I am not concerned in the least as opposed to yesterday, And I was thinking to myself, like, see, this is what I can handle. I can handle a little bit of snow on the roads, but what I can't handle is when there's a lot of snow and then there's snow still coming down because now it's impairing my eyesight and my ability to keep my truck stable. But as I started to get further and further into Ohio, I started to realize that I was following the storm, and I eventually got right back into the storm. And again, in retrospect, I probably should have waited it out, but in my mind, I'm like, maybe the storm could have lost its girth for a second, and maybe this is just the last little few moments of the storm before it ends. But no, obviously not. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Once I started getting further into Ohio, it started getting really, really bad. I mean, very, very, very bad. And I was barely going like 40 miles an hour. I don't know what was going on in my mind. I think I was telling myself I just want to get home. Similarly to the flood video, sometimes I'm in a place where mentally I'm like, if I was this close to coming home, I should be able to get home as long as I'm careful. In retrospect, I would have not pushed it this far. I mean, it was a bunch of snow on the ground and it was still coming down hard, and no matter how much people were plowing, it really still wasn't helping because the snow was still coming down, and it was to the point you couldn't see the lines on the road. And now I'm actually empty, so I don't have a full trailer behind me, which means that I don't have as much momentum as a heavier truck would. I struggled to get to my destination, and it was a 200-mile drive. By the grace of God, I made it there. Me getting there, I was pretty much on edge. I, at this point, had anxiety, and I'm like, Lord, please, let me just get out of here. So I finally get to my destination, and because everything is freaking white, I couldn't really identify where I was supposed to be at. So once GPS dropped me off at a certain point, I just got out and walked to the nearest door. When I got to that door, the door said that the shipper that I had pulled up to closed due to the storm. That was tough. Obviously, you could understand that I was a little stressed at this point. I made it 200 miles through this snow just to get here, and you're telling me that because of the snow, you're closed. So I head back to my truck. And from here, that's when stuff started tripping on me, okay? So I get back in my truck, and I have my book bag on, right? You guys know I have like this, it's like a fanny pack / book bag. I wear it over top my torso. I had it on, and I got into my truck. My steering wheel is sort of keeping my book bag and my leg from really getting into the truck, and it's primarily because I have my book bag on. But because it's so cold outside, and I'm honestly a little frustrated, I'm just trying to close my door. So my leg is caught in between the door and my book bag, and my book bag is caught in between the steering wheel and my leg. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I go to slam my door. Obviously, I have too much stuff in the way of the door, so I'm trying to make sure that I can close the door tight. It didn't really close the first time, so I slammed it again. After I slammed it, I tried to pull my book bag. So I sort of did like this, but my book bag wasn't budging. So I pulled it again. And I realized that it was snagging on something. I looked down. I had a crochet needle inside of my book bag, and apparently it had stuck into my leg. And me snagging on it and it not budging was because it was inside of my leg. And when I tell you, I almost threw up right there because I was gross. Not only was it gross, but I was also grossed out that I didn't feel it. But that's how cold it was outside, that my legs were pretty much not able to feel it. Like, it didn't go through muscle or nothing, but it was just the fact that it was in my skin and it wasn't able to budge even though I was pulling on my book bag. So I had to pull the crochet needle out of my leg, and then I was like grossed out. So I stabbed myself, in other words, and it goes downhill from there. I get a hold to my fleet managers and I'm telling them like, hey, this place is closed. They get me onto another load that's pretty much going to Michigan. And in my mind, I'm like, all right, Lord, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to Michigan today, but at least I'm gonna try to get to this load, right? There wasn't any truck stops over here anyway, and there wasn't any like rest area or nothing like that. I was like in the country area. Mind you, it's still steadily snowing, and I have an empty trailer still. So I'm really coasting at this point. I'm praying, I'm singing gospel music, I'm calling on the Lord, all of that. Just because at this point, now I'm starting to feel uncomfortable on the road. I was already feeling uncomfortable going down to Ohio once it started getting real bad. But I was very uncomfortable knowing that I had sat there for about 45 minutes waiting to figure out another plan. And at this point, it was still snowing heavily. At this point, now that I'm driving, the roads, it was so snowy on the roads that even on the freeway, there was barely any tire marks because it was just packed with snow. Not only that, but there was only like one lane that people were able to drive through because the other lane was like untouched. Like the fast lane was untouched and it was just snow. I'm like coasting on by and I'm telling myself the next rest area I get to, I'm gonna hit my windshield wipers real good, clean off my windshield, and I'm gonna try to make it to a truck stop, right? I would say about 20 minutes into driving down this freeway, I noticed that there's a rest area coming up and I'm like, all right, cool, I'm gonna stop here. I would say about 5 miles from the rest area, another truck had passed me and the people behind me in the left lane, and they were going significantly faster than us. And this lane, once again, didn't have any tire tracks. It was a lot of snow and all that. You know, obviously I'm like, oh, well, if you feel like you could do it. So fast forward, I get about a mile to the rest area. And when I tell you that same truck is flipped over in the median, tires still spinning, lights still on. And when I saw that, I was like, all right, no, it's time for me to stop. I stopped at the rest area and I was done for the day. When I saw that, I can't lie to you, that's what told me that I needed to stop. Because I'm like, all right, I know that you were speeding, but you weren't even speeding by that much. You was probably going like 5 to 10 miles more than us. And you flipped over. And it's not that much better on the right side of the freeway, like the right lane. So you probably had a full load with you. I'm empty. I refuse. So I went ahead, stopped at the rest area, turned my truck off, and I stopped for the day, right? You would think that the story was over, but it actually wasn't. I thought I was going to stop for the rest of the day. Child, when I tell you I quit for the day, today, I ain't felt nothing but pure anxiety. And I mean, I've been praying all day. But, I mean, if you can look behind me, right past me, if you saw them lights over there, that's because a truck flipped over. And if you can tell, I'm discombobulated just because this entire time, this entire day, I would say like an hour into driving, the weather grew exponentially worse. And it's not to say that I didn't expect it to be bad, but I ain't never experienced something like this before. Never. I've driven through Colorado mountains with it snowing. I was gonna stop here at this rest area and clean my windshield wipers once again because I have to do it every time I stop just so that I can be able to see after the debacle that happened yesterday. But after I saw that truck, I went ahead and stopped here for the day because it's been too many times I done slid. It's been too many times where I was just uncomfortable, and I can't stress this enough. If you feel uncomfortable driving, you need to stop. I think the Lord was like, what are you doing? You gonna keep going? Well, let me show you what happens when you keep going. And he legit showed me this truck flip over, and I pray that they're okay. I couldn't even stop fast enough to get to them or anything like that because it's so slippery. One jerky move and you'll freaking flip over too. And the way that they were on the left side and I was on the right, coasting, I would have had to get in the snow and all of that stuff. And I just wasn't prepared for that. But luckily, somebody was able to stop and call 911. Man, they got a tow truck going out there. Like, man, and that ain't the first truck I saw. I've seen so many trucks, but it took for me to see a truck still wheels spinning to realize, like, you playing with fire. Like, you can't be out here driving and coasting around. I thought that I was doing okay, but I've been sliding, and it's only a matter of time. It takes one gust of wind. It takes one car to spin out in front of me. It takes one situation for me to lose control, and I've already slid one too many times. So I went to the bathroom. I went ahead, called my fleet managers. I'm like, look, I just witnessed a truck flip over. I quit for the day. I'm gonna go ahead and try to wait it out at this rest area. I'm feeling good because I'm like, you know what, thank God I made it to where I needed to be. I'm not in any harm. I didn't, I'm praising God at this point because it's like I'm so happy. I felt like that was you telling me to stop. Like, you know how it is. So I go ahead, get back in my truck. I go ahead, get to the back, and I turn on my bunk heater because it's getting, I don't want it to get cold. I'm about to get toasty. Me and Pepper, we about to chill out. I get myself prepared. I think I was about to start eating. When I would say about 10 minutes into it, I start feeling like this cold draft in my truck. And I'm like, okay, it's a little too cold in here and I don't understand why it's cold. So let me look at this bunk heater window. So I look at my little bunk heater thingy. I don't know what it's called. It says that it's off. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I turn it back on. Wait a minute. It's still not turning on. I'll go to put my hand near the vent that normally pushes out hot air, and it's actually cold air. I look back at the window and it says that it doesn't have a flame. And that was the first time I'd ever had that message. I've had plenty messages before, and most of the time what I normally do is I take my earring off, put the pin of my earring in the hole, and I restart the system, and then my bunk heater normally works. So when I saw that it said no flame, that was a new message, but I tried to use my same old trick to try to figure it out. It still didn't work. So at this point, it's getting cold, so I go and start my truck, and I go ahead and call servicing, not so that they can come to me, but just so that they can give me some info. Long story short, I ended up talking to some people that were in the shop at one of our terminals. I'm telling them, like, this is what's going on with my bunk heater, da-da-da-da. Somebody already gave me a tip on what to do when I spoke to the other person, but it didn't work. They were telling me that the reason why my flame was out was because the way that they said it made it seem like the wind was hitting my truck in a certain area where the flame couldn't catch. And I wasn't comprehending, and not to mention I wasn't in an area where I could turn around. Like, I'm in a rest area. You can't turn around in a rest area because then you'd be going the opposite way of the freeway. And so, I went and tried to dust off my gas lines over there near where the gas connects to your bunk heater or whatever. I tried dusting that off and things like that because it was a bunch of snow over there. And I tried like making sure that the hoses aren't loose and things like that. None of them seem to be loose or anything. And long story short, I ended up talking to somebody else because it didn't help. And that person told me that I needed to go to a hotel, that there was nobody that was going to come and help me because they don't do servicing on bunk heaters out on the road. They do that inside of a shop. So I'm like, okay, well, the problem is I stopped here for a reason. It's actually pretty bad out here, not to mention I'm not going to be able to, like get a ride out here because I'm not about to call an Uber out here so they can get stuck. Long story short, they're like, well, either you have a policeman escort you out to a hotel, or you try to make it there yourself, or you stay in your truck. So whoever I was talking to, they probably had plenty calls that day. I didn't really take offense to what he was saying, but I was getting frustrated because it's like the first time I stopped because of a snowstorm, my bunk heater don't want to work. Like, that is so unfair. After I got off the phone with him, I made the executive decision to find the closest hotel that allowed for me to bring pets, and I was going to try to coast my way there. I still had some time left on my clock, and I was just going to make it there, right? I wasn't going to call a cop. I didn't feel like it was that serious. It was, but not. Like, what was a cop gonna do? It's not like he could tow me out of the situation. You know what I'm saying? What are you gonna do? I'm not about to call an Uber, like I said, and I'm not about to stay out here and be cold. Y'all, I got stuck on an exit ramp. I literally, I pulled onto the freeway, and then I tried to exit, and the ramp was going a little bit upwards, and nobody had plowed this area. And I guess because I was trying to still drive slow enough so that I didn't slide, I wasn't driving fast enough so that I could get through the snow. So I just got stuck, and no matter what type of shimmying I was doing, no matter how many times I tried to reverse a little bit, pull forward, none of that, I was stuck. And again, I didn't have kitty litter, so I was stuck. So at this point, it's like 8, I want to say it's like 8 p.m. It's dark outside. I'm on an exit ramp, which means that I'm pretty much blocking the exit for if anybody else needs to come up. It's not that many people out here on the road. So it's not like I was blocking a bunch of traffic. Like there wasn't anybody that was on that ramp for about 15 minutes after I had got stuck. So I go ahead and I get out my 3 triangles, or at least I try to. I also have my phone and my flashlight on my phone, trying to make sure that I can see. I dropped my phone in the snow, so now my phone starts malfunctioning, and I'm trying to hurry up because I don't want to get hit, nor do I want anybody to slam into my truck. And so I'm trying to hurry up and get my three cones out, my 3 triangles. I finally get those out while I'm trying to dust my phone off and everything. I put my cones out there and I get back into my truck. I got my hazard lights on, and at this point, y'all, I am annoyed because it's like, dog. Also, side mark, because I didn't even really tell you guys this. When I was on the phone with the person that was at the shop and he was telling me you need to go get a hotel, he also briefly said that the snowstorm wasn't that bad. Once I got stuck on that exit ramp, that was all I was thinking about. Like, so it's not that bad, huh? Okay. It's not that bad. So don't listen to nobody when people try to make you seem like you overreacting to something. If it's not that bad, then you wouldn't have the intuition to not drive through it. You know what I'm saying? That's how I feel. At this point, a cop ends up coming to where I'm at. I'm also trying to get my phone to charge because I'm trying to call roadside servicing so I could get a tow truck over here, and my phone isn't charging. So I'm trying to let my phone air out from the snow and things like that. Y'all, the cop, he comes over to my window and he's like, it looks like you're stuck, huh? And I'm like, yeah. So he ends up asking me if I want him to call a tow truck. And I had been on the phone with roadside service, or at least on hold, because I wasn't able to get to them yet. I was still in the line of people that were trying to get to them. And it had been like 10 minutes at this point. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and call someone, because it's not like I'm stuck on the side of the road. No, I'm stuck on an exit ramp. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to hold people up. So I'm still on hold with my roadside service people. It's dark out here. So someone's plowing in front of me. And so I try pulling forward. I pulled forward and I was able to move forward, but they didn't plow enough, and I ended up getting stuck like a little bit further down on the same exit ramp, and they had disappeared after that. So I'm like, bro, why didn't you just finish plowing the rest of this exit ramp? Side thought, I could have had some chains on my tires too, but we ain't even gonna get into that. Eventually, the tow guy that the cop called eventually comes to get me out of this situation. And at this point, now the roadside service people are on the phone. And I'm like, hey, just know that the cop called such and such, and so this is the company that's gonna be billing you. And they're like, all right, cool. And I wasn't necessarily upset that they had me on hold, because I understand that it was a whole bunch of people in line. Like there was probably a plethora of people in similar situations that I was. So I knew it was tough for them. And everybody that I got on the phone with had an attitude. So I knew that they were dealing with a lot. The tow truck guy, he hooks me onto his truck and he pulls me onto a different part of the freeway, because obviously I exited off of one freeway, but I was exiting onto another freeway. And so once he pulled me off, he pulled me onto the shoulder of the next freeway. We stopped and he got out and came over to me and he was like, where are you trying to go? And I'm like, I'm trying to go to this hotel. It's like 10 more miles away, and da da da. And he's like, you're not gonna be able to make it because there's a hill further down on this freeway. I don't think you'll be able to make it. You should have just stopped for the day. And so I'm explaining to him, like, I did try to stop, but my bunk heater was out. And so he's like, oh yeah, because it's bad out here or whatever. So at this point, he offers to tow me to my location, or at least tow me past this hill point that I'm at. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Da, 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 da. It's snowing heavy. It's like dark out here. And I'm really grateful for what he's about to do, just because, I don't want to get stuck, if that's what he's saying. At this point, I'm like, all right, cool. I started telling my fleet managers that I'm headed to this hotel room and all this stuff, whatever. He comes back to me at this point and he's telling me, like, all right, so you could just come and get into my truck. And I'm like, can I bring my dog with me? And he's like, yeah. So after he's telling me you can go ahead. So I'm like, all right, what do I need to do in here? I need to press my air brakes in. I need to turn my gear into neutral, and I need to get my stuff, and I need to get Pepper's stuff. So I do those things and I go to grab my bag. Immediately I feel this impact and I look ahead of me, and like my nose is touching the back of the tow truck. And immediately I'm like, dang, like, why would he pull me that hard? You know, Pepper done got a little scared because she like, why would that? Like, Pepper not knowing what's going on. She's just looking around like, bro, what was that? He comes over to the window and he's like, you didn't set your air brakes. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, I thought you need me to not have my air brakes on for me to be told. And he was like, I was never hooked on to you. Y'all, I collided into this truck because my air brakes wasn't on. He was never hooked on to me. And I'm over here like, bro, what? You weren't hooked on to me? Like, what do you mean? And in retrospect, I realized mentally I was all over the place. He was hooked on to me, but then he unhooked from me. And I wasn't even thinking about it. And so, me knowing that he's telling me to get into his truck, I'm trying to prepare. And so, I'm just like, this is what I need to do for him to tow me. So, let me just do this. And, child, no. Child. Oh, my God. So, thank God it wasn't very far. Because he was right in front of me. So, it's not like I was, like, feet away from him. No, it was just a little bit. The truck did like roll a little bit into him. But so at this point now the cop is coming over to assess the issue. So the cop comes over and we're both explaining to him what happened. And the cop is like, oh, okay, so this looks like it was just a misunderstanding. And so I'm not going to cite you for it and things like that. And I'm like, well, thank God, because I do not have time for a ticket. I'm over here like, bro, I know I didn't just get into a whole accident. I have never gotten into an accident before. And on top of that, this was like the most terrible time. So like it's snowing out here. I'm just trying to get to a hotel. I'm talking to the tow truck guy and I'm like, I'm sorry that, this took place. And he's like, man, I'm sorry too. This is just a whole lot that's going on with you. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, are you still gonna take me to this hotel? And he like, no. I'm like, oh wow, okay. Well, thank you anyways. At this point now he's like, well, I wasn't planning on it, but what I can do is I can't follow you because if I tow you from where we are right now, I'm realizing that it's gonna charge your company a lot more. Which to me, it's like, why would you tell me that? That doesn't concern me. I'm not getting charged, but whatever. At this point, I just feel like he wasn't feeling it no more. Oh, child. Anyways, so he's like, what I can do is I can drive ahead of you. You can follow me to your destination. I can make sure that you don't get stuck because if you do get stuck, then I will tow you. Which in retrospect, it sort of don't make sense to me because if you're going to where I'm going, why not just tow me there? It's not like your equipment is messed up. My truck is barely messed up. It wasn't like a huge impact. It was just enough to crack my radar in the front of my truck. Like it wasn't to the point where you can't tow me or things like that, right? We end up getting to the hotel. And thankfully, I did not get stuck again. So I say all of that to say I ended up at this hotel for 2 days, or I guess that night, and then the whole next day. And then the day after that next day, I ended up leaving. I chilled. I took the liberty of doing some extra work. Me and Pepper, we ate, we watched movies, and I was just trying to get myself prepared to come back out on the road after the snowstorm. I told the company about the little incident. It was no problem. They fixed it. It's not on my record. It's not an issue. Thank God for that as well. After that full day, the next day, which I believe it was the 5th at this point, the snow subsided. People were finally able to tow the streets and tow the area that I was at good enough for me to feel comfortable to leave again. I was stuck because my truck hadn't moved the entire time I was at the hotel, so it was still stuck in snow. I had to pull my release arm, and thankfully that gave me enough momentum again to be able to pull forward. And from there, I went ahead, got my load, and then came on home. After my 34-hour reset at home, because I needed to get myself situated at home. After that, I went to my nearest terminal, got my truck fixed on, and now we're all good. So obviously, what took place was a bunch of crap. I know there's a few of you OGs on here that would love to give me constructive criticism and you have a lot of words to say about what took place and things like that, trust and believe, it was a little difficult telling you guys this story just because all throughout it, looking in retrospect, I could tell that I was not making the absolute best decisions and I could have had it a lot easier. And that is what propelled me to tell this story, because obviously I've had situations go haywire before, but some of that wasn't in my hands. At this point, it felt like a few more things were in my hands and I just chose poorly. So my purpose of this video was not only to help you to learn from my mistakes, but also to show you that things can really snowball. When you're out here, things can snowball really quickly. And you really just have to keep a hold of yourself, because at the end of the day, no matter who you can or can't call, you're technically the manager of the situation. It's not like you're working in retail and you have someone to call if someone's being irate towards you, or it's not like you can just walk out of the building. No, you're in a truck. You have to make the decisions for yourself, and sometimes you won't make the best decisions, but I guarantee you, if you have the opportunity to look back at your situations in retrospect, if you can make mental notes of this is what I could have done to improve this situation, if you ever run into a situation similar in the future, you'll be able to handle it a lot better. With that being said, I have 5 tips that I wrote down that I wanted to share with you guys. Not to mention, I know there's going to be a few of you who give tips down below. Please feel free to share your tips. But here are my tips that I wanted to share with you. Number 1, and this is my absolute biggest tip for you guys: if you feel unsafe or uncomfortable or anxious to drive because of any circumstance, stop. Stop, pull over, and wait it out. Wait it out if it's windy, wait it out if it's too much rain, wait it out if it's too much snow, wait it out if it's too foggy, whatever, wait it out. Number 2, follow the news. The weather, follow that. Don't just glance at it. Don't just assume, don't underestimate, but follow it. That was one of my biggest faults. I glanced at the news and I read that it was going on in Michigan, and I was almost entirely oblivious to the fullness of the storm during this time. And if I had known that it was gonna be to that extent, I probably would have stopped sooner, or I probably would have planned my time a lot better. I feel like the best of us plan, and that's what prevents you from getting into a lot of situations like this. So part of trip planning is definitely looking at the weather and following the weather too. It isn't just about how big or how bad the storm is, but also where it's going. It can obviously change course after a while too. So another tip is, if you are empty and it is snowing and it is bad out there, you might want to consider stopping a little sooner than if you were full and you had a fully loaded trailer. For those of you who don't really get the concept, just picture it this way. If you can picture one of those like bouncy balls from Walmart that used to be in those random ball pens that are just like in the toy aisle, and they're like those hollow balls, picture that trying to roll through the snow versus like a bowling ball. Obviously, the bowling ball is going to have more momentum. It's going to be able to go in a straighter line. It's going to be able to sort of carry itself through the snow, versus that hollow ball that's probably going to scoot a little, probably go off track a little bit easier, like things like that. If you can compare those two, then you can understand that a hollow trailer, it's more likely to lose traction, more likely to get blown by the wind, or to lose your steering. All that to say, if you're empty, I would consider stopping a lot sooner. Another tip is to, if you are not empty, but you do know that there is some type of snowstorm coming about or anything like that, I would suggest that you put more weight on your drive tires rather than your tandem tires. I was talking to one of the drivers at my terminal and they were like, that helps me. So I'm just relaying this information to you. It may be like well-known information. I'm sure it should, because it's sort of common sense, but if you don't know, that's what I'm giving to you. Tip number 5, when it comes to a tow truck, never assume anything, okay? This is a very random tip, but it may save you in the long run. If I were you, I would get out and look before you decide to push the air brakes in and all that. Don't assume anything, because I assumed that he was hooked up onto me, and I'm not saying whose fault it was, because it was just a miscommunication, but in the future, I'm going to get out and make sure that the person is hooked up to me, because it's so easy to think like once they're hooked onto you that any movement could be caused by them, you know. And thank God I didn't go backwards, I went forward, because if I was just rolling backwards, you know, I was sort of in my truck trying to handle stuff, so I wasn't necessarily paying attention. And that's another thing, also pay attention. Like, I'm gonna give myself grace and say that I was just going through a lot. Like, my leg was literally still bleeding from the stab wound that I had given myself earlier. Like, I was going through a lot mentally with everything, that I was sort of all over the place. So I'm not gonna beat myself up about what happened. But I do know that in the future, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. Never assume with getting towed. Also, I have a bonus tip for you guys, and that is read the room. Obviously, you're not in a room, but the same rules apply. If you are starting to feel uncomfortable, but you also see that there are trucks flipped over in the medians, or cars that are off to the side, pretty much like vacant, maybe that should be your cue to stop, to pull over. Okay? Because that was my cue, okay? And if it hadn't have been for that bunk heater incident, I would have stopped and I would have been content. Nevertheless, I know that at the end of the day, I did have a better time at the hotel than I would have in my truck for 2 days, because I was running out of food. I was not where I was able to take a shower. In retrospect, although I would have preferred to not have the rest of those incidents occur, I'm happy that God was able to bring me to a hotel safe and sound with no accidents where people got hurt, nothing like that. I still have my job. I actually have nothing on my record still. Okay, I got one more tip for you, and that is to give yourself grace, because that was one thing that I had to realize is obviously take responsibility, obviously learn from your mistakes, give yourself time to figure out ways to prevent yourself from making the same mistakes and things like that. But also have grace with yourself, because you're still human, and stressful situations bring out the most chaotic versions of you sometimes if you allow it. And that's why I always say never allow yourself to get frustrated and frantic, especially in front of people, because when you get frustrated, you cause that energy to fluctuate into other people. So like, if I was wild and crazy about whatever transpired between me and the tow truck guy, he probably would have got wild or crazy, probably pulled off on me or something. Or maybe the cop would have been like, well, I would have said that this was a misunderstanding, but da 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 da. Like, you never know. Your energy is very powerful. That stuff can really get into other people. And as long as you have a calm spirit about yourself, you can sort of control the energy around you. Does that make sense? I pray about it. Even if I'm talking to people, I'm probably praying about it in my head, like, Lord, help me, you know? And even when I have situations like this that occur that seem like a huge snowball, at the end of the day, I always end up in a better position where I either learn from my mistakes or I come out typically unscathed. Not to say that I'm above that type of detriment, but I do believe that a big portion of that is my demeanor, that I stay calm. So that's my last tip for you. I think I've given you like 10 at this point, but nevertheless, if you guys have any tips for anybody else when it comes to driving in a snowstorm or anything, please let them know down in the comments. Also, I already know somebody about to light me up, just because y'all real good for lighting me up for any type of mistake I do. Whatever it may be, just keep it respectful, you guys. But I love you all so much, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video. Bye.